foundation: da'wah, tarbiyah, and education, establishing the foundations of Islamic civilization in South Africa.
أحب الوفاء بشتى الصور، أحب الوفي الأمين الأغر، فأهل الوفاء كلون السحاب وحسن الربيع وماء المطر. أحب الوفاء بشتى الصور، أحب الوفي.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم سيدنا محمد وآله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. All praise due to Allah, the Lord, cherisher, nourisher, sustainer and master of the universe, the most gracious, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Ya Allah, it is only you that we worship and it is your guidance that we seek. Ya Allah, keep us on the straight path. Ya Allah, show us your choice of blessings. Ya Allah, show us your mercy. Ya Allah, guide us. Greetings, salam, salutations on our beloved Nabi Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's now 9 minutes past 9 on this beautiful Friday evening, and of course, it's time for Let's Chat. So, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Radio Al Ansar on 90.4 FM. This evening on Let's Chat, we are discussing courageous conversations. Lovely words for a Friday evening. And of course, we have our two very popular guests on radio, Nadia, Bhayat. Nadia, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for joining me in the program this evening.
Wa alaikum salam. And it's always a pleasure to share Friday evening with you, Faizal.
It's a wonderful feeling, undoubtedly. Fathima, Fayers, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Fatima is our occupational therapist. Okay, I'm going to introduce both our guests. And Nadia, do I need to introduce you, Nadia? I'm sure everybody knows your bio backwards, I think. Okay.
I think
Nadia.
so. I think introduce Fatima. She's the key element.
I know, but you know
You
what?
always give me more credit than is my due.
We will introduce you first, Nadia. We go by seniority.
Just don't say age.
I use the word seniority deliberately. I use the word. Nadia's passion to help people thrive first led her to a bachelor's degree in psychology and double honors degree in speech therapy and audiology. She trained as a neuro rehab specialist and also has a diploma in Montessori teaching. Her interest in advocacy work developed early on in her career and was refined by her work in the medical legal field. Nadia's professional journey has spanned 3 continents: Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. She has the privilege of helping to shape the healthcare system at a Johns Hopkins facility in the Middle East and headed rehabilitation services and operations for a branch of the Abu Dhabi government. Nadia also has a master's in health management and leadership from the UK. She has developed training programs for universities and medical schools, has co-authored 3 books, and is currently the director of an NGO, Action for Autism. Fatima Fayers, let's go for you now. Fatima is our occupational therapist, born and bred in Durban, studied at the UK ZN University, Westville, completed a degree in 2013 and master's in 2019, completed community service in the Amajuba district, returned home and locumed in different areas of practice, such as school and therapy center, physical hospitals, substance abuse rehab, until settling at her current workplace, Mondia in Umhlanga, which is a subacute psychiatry facility in Umhlanga, been practicing in mental health for 8 years. It has been her greatest blessing, alhamdulillah, to learn and grow as an individual and a professional. And that's it, Fatima. Thank you for your, for having sort of restricted your CV. I mean, I was hoping I'm not going to spend most of the show, reading your credentials. But our topic for discussion is having courageous conversations. And Nadia, let's just start from you, Nadia. What inspired you to start having courageous conversations, and how has it impacted on your life? Or rather, before we go there, what do we mean by courageous conversations?
So before I tell you what that means, I think I'd like to say when we avoid having these difficult, because Difficult conversations are the courageous conversations you should be having. We trade short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction. And that is key to everything. So I would say that what it means to me is that it's the ability to stay present in often difficult and uncomfortable situations. I mean, it's when the emotions are high on both sides of the conversation. It can be awkward, stressful, or challenging, in fact.
Okay. Uh, Fatima, your version of courageous conversations.
I love it. I love the quote that Nadia started with. It sums it up so beautifully because that's the essence of it. The minute you hear the word courage, you know something's going to push you out of your comfort zone somewhere. And the price that you're going to pay for not having that conversation is going to be far greater than the momentary comfort that we can almost serve ourselves. So
I
it's
think
those
it's
those
very
uncomfortable things that need to be said, or those questions that need to be explored that aren't, because it just doesn't feel right in the moment, or it doesn't feel comfortable rather.
so. Just to sum it up in a nutshell, in our layman's language, uh, you're having difficulty in embarking upon a conversation. You want to discuss something with somebody. You want to tell them something, and it's necessary for you to tell them or to deal with it. Otherwise, the repercussions are going to be quite problematic in the future. And that is what we call a courageous conversation. In order to embark on that conversation, am I correct?
For sure. I think also, like you mentioned, in the layman's terms, it's not going to be that conversation that's going to go down nicely with a cup of tea. You know, it's
Okay.
almost the ones that will make someone want to choke the minute it comes up. It's like, no, let's not go there. Let's rather push that under the carpet or pretend it's not needed.
But Faisal,
Mhm.
when you
Yes,
have
ma'am.
courageous conversations, it's
Mhm.
it's it's difficult on both sides. It's for the person who is hearing it, but it's also difficult to tell it. So I
Mhm.
don't think you can say it's a one-sided event.
For sure.
I mean, think about it. Your heart starts to beat faster. You have this pit in your tummy. You feel a little bit nauseous walking into these kinds of uncomfortable conversations. Would you agree, Fatima?
Absolutely. I think it's also because it's this vulnerability that you're about to put on the table. You're almost bearing your soul, and there's that chance that it might not be accepted or it might not be received well, or like you mentioned, there's bound to be emotions. And we
Mhm.
don't always want to hurt the next person or make anyone feel uncomfortable. So 100%, it's a space where there's a lot of rawness that is required.
No, no, I think it's. I'm glad. I like the way you have described it because this is a situation we find ourselves in on almost on a daily basis or very often. And I think it's time we discussed it, got into it, and found a solution, a way to overcome it. Nadia, you suggested this topic for discussion. Now, what inspired you to start having courageous conversations, and how has it impacted on your life? Now, whilst Nadia, I've directed this question to you, I'm sure Fatima is working up an answer as well from her version. But let's start with you, Fatima, Nadia.
I think, Faisal, we go through life trying to sidestep these difficult conversations. And the more you pushed in let's look at it from a professional perspective, the more you pushed into a position where you're leading people and you
Hmm.
managing people, you having to do this. I mean, for me, when things get uncomfortable, sometimes you think, "Oh, I rather step out of this." Sometimes in a work situation, you think, instead of going into this really difficult, nitty-gritty kind of thing, why don't I just resign? It's that quiet quitting that we do in our lives.
Hmm.
So for me, this happened when, I was on a board not so long ago, and we were having this real tension develop with a really key part of the board, which managed finances.
Mhm.
And, when I think you get to that point where sometimes the conversation really sort of deteriorates, and we hear it and we actually, I mean, I listen to the news and I listen to the terminology people use. So when you start to equate humans to it, they, them, the third person, then you know there's a problem because you've almost dehumanized a situation.
Mhm.
And the only way, Faisal, to do these courageous conversations is face to face.
Yes, definitely. It's always better to have them face to face than telephonically or via WhatsApp, etc. Because your demeanor cannot be determined or ascertained if it's not done face to face. And I think in conversations like this, your demeanor, plays a huge part. Fatima, your
Mm.
thoughts?
100%. I can only add sentiment to that because it's so important. Nadia used the word mindful at the very beginning. And when we're having conversations that are very often emotionally charged, or there's a lot of emotion to be considered in it, you can't read that on WhatsApp. Yes, there might be
Hmm.
emoticons, or someone might press the caps lock button by mistake, and next thing you know, it's all in caps, or there's a lot of exclamation marks. There's a lot of room for misinterpretation. And this is where it goes back to our basics when it comes to communication skills. What does it actually mean to have a conversation? What is my body language saying the same thing? Is my tone of voice maybe slightly raised? And that can be misinterpreted. So it's almost taking a minute to just listen to myself to make sure that I'm coming across in a way that I intended. And if there's any room for misunderstanding, that's open. Part of communication is that we open the floor for conversation, for clarification if need be. And it's not a matter of expecting the next person to read my mind, or it's also not a matter of targeting the person. It's
Hmm.
rather what is the situation that is in front of us and how do we problem solve through it together. So it goes back to the basics of what does having a conversation entail, what is basic communication. And I find that it's really difficult because when we often see patients, they're already going through a difficult moment in their life. And the skills, the life skills that are required of them to be able to cope through those situations, and for any of us, being human, we all are going to go through it at some point. But it's in order for us to go through that successfully, the first conversation we always need to have is with ourselves. And it's when we miss that moment for that internal dialogue, to be clear on how do I really feel about this? And how do I convey that, or how do I express that? Like Nadia said, as opposed to sort of shying away from it, or just sort of smiling and waving, or taking the quiet, the more common way out, if we can call it that, the one that's going to rather just create a sense of harmony, where actually the reality is it isn't. Um, so I think it's having that space where we are honest with ourselves first, so that we're able to confidently share that honesty in the place of a conversation.
Absolutely. You're listening to Let's Chat on Radio Al Ansar, and our topic for discussion is courageous conversations. You can contribute to the topic and to the discussion. You may forward to us your WhatsApp messages on 060-904-1056. That's 060-904-1056. We are on radio, we're live on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and on audio streaming, so you can get us on any platform. And yes, but let's go for it. All right. Fatima, I'm going to put you in the hot seat now. I know I'm doing this to Nadia all the time, but I'm going to share this question with her as well. Fatima, can you share an example of a particularly challenging conversation you've had to have, and how did you approach it?
Oh, it's a tough one to pick one, Faisal. Um,
I'm
I
sure.
think the difference for me is if anyone that knows me knows that I'm always going to be the one that's pulling the silver lining out, or like I said earlier, bringing the joy to the space, and lighthearted. And I are going to be in the same space. So when there are difficult conversations coming to light, I will almost be the first one to step away from the emotion. And I have learned over time that that is not always the best response. and to be able to hold space for those emotions, but also to be able to separate them from the conversation at hand. So I think a common one would be always with family. You know, when we are with our family, we often feel safe and we feel secure enough to be able to be real. You know, we don't have to keep up any appearances or we don't have to say what needs to be said. So I think if I have to think of any of the conversations around the family table or around the supper table, these are the spaces where we are held accountable. You know, we are told the things that we don't always want to hear, but we need to hear. And I think that the really nice thing within my family is that we all are very different. So we have different approaches, but you almost know who's the one that's going to be emotional first, who's the one that's going to be the level head, who's the one that's going to bring a different perspective to the table. And alhamdulillah, it's through these experiences or through these moments where we learn that, oh, wait a minute, that method works really well. This one doesn't. Here's how it changes the theme, or here's how it changes the feel in the room. So I think for me, it's a space where these conversations happen frequently is with family. And I also think that it really challenges us because if we can't speak our truth in the spaces that we feel safe and secure, how are we going to do that in spaces where there is almost more at risk, like, for example, in the workplace? Yeah, so I think that that for me is the practice round, and a lot of the learning and a lot of the highland earring comes from around our dinner tables.
Excellent. And Nadia, your version.
Fatima, I agree with you, but I think the people who know us best are our tribe. You know, those very good friends, because sometimes, you know, they know things that sometimes our families don't really know. And they've
This is
seen
also
us navigate situations that, you know, are slightly different. I think our families always believe the very best of us, always want to see us in that good light. But the people who hold us to ourselves and hold us accountable to ourselves, that mirror is our friends. And you know, they know when you not being honest, not being truthful. They know when you say I'm okay and you're really not okay. I mean, you know, those triggers you talked about, you know, who will be emotional, who is one, you know, we all have those triggers, and you know, we do need to learn. Faisal, my sister used to say, you need to learn to temper heart and mind, or you will lose every time. And I'm learning to pause, you know. You don't need to quickly hit send on an email.
Yes.
You need
so
to
great to reread it again.
and breathe, you know. You can wait 24 hours. You don't need to CC the world. Just find your space. Find that reconnection with who you are. And don't let a trigger, you know, make you do something that you might regret.
Well, that is
Yeah.
unlike you.
I think it's absolutely vital because many times, you know, we react impulsively and we don't think how we're reacting, and then we regret why we reacted in that particular manner. And yet, when you think about, you know, the situation, you ponder about it, you realize because many times you become defensive as well. And in
Mhm.
becoming defensive, you're not stating the truth. You're just trying to find something in defense of what's happening, and then you realize, man, there is a plausible explanation for this. And I'm not sure if you guys have experienced that.
I think you've got to look at, you know, when you're having conversations with people, you've
Hmm.
got to look at some alignment. You know, Fatima was talking about your words and your body language and facial expression all being in alignment. And I think that's why sometimes people find it very difficult to actually have a conversation with someone who doesn't make eye contact,
Mm-hmm.
who has a very deadpan expression, and you cannot read how they feel or how they're reacting to what you're saying. So, alignment, I think, is important.
Mm-hmm.
Symmetry, symmetry, we need to be on the same page about things. I could be talking about apples and you talking about potatoes. And therein lies the disconnect almost, and the friction that comes up. So we always have to sort of take a step back and say, well, are we on the same page?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Um, You are listening to Let's Chat on Radio Al Ansar. We are discussing courageous conversations, and I'm sure that you've all found yourself in situations where you've had to have some courageous conversations. And I'd like to know how you dealt with it, what sort of a situation you were in, etc. Do forward to us, your submission your submission or contributions via WhatsApp on 060 904 1056. Our guests this evening are Nadia Bhayat, a neuro rehab specialist, and Fatima Fayers, an occupational therapist. And of course, as I said, we are discussing courageous conversation. It's time for us to visit the marketplace, and we'll take a quick ad break and continue with the program on the other side. Do stay with us, and remember, once again, your contributions can come through on 060 904 1056.
Day of judgment. The messenger of Islam.
You're listening to Let's Chat on Radio Al Ansar, and our topic for discussion this evening is courageous conversations. Our guests are Nadia Bhayat and Fathima Fayers. Just prior to the ad break, Nadia and Fatima, we did discuss some examples that that you people had experienced, and some and just explaining the concept of courageous conversations. Now, what makes courageous conversation so important? I'm directing the question to both the Fatima and to Nadia. You can decide who's going to go first.
Fatima, let's talk about the mental health.
I think when we don't have it, that's when we find ourselves, that's when we find a lot more to work through in therapy. It's not that it's always going to lead there, but often I find that when we work through the challenges that patients are experiencing, every solution comes back down to I need to have a conversation about this. Or if I say something, how is it going to work out? And we go back to the basics of how do we open the floor to conversations that are really difficult? Whether it is actually, you know what, I'm struggling to cope. I'm struggling with my anxiety, or I have a diagnosis and I don't know what that means and I don't know where to go from here. How do I tell my family I've been diagnosed with something? What are my work colleagues going to think about me now that I'm diagnosed with a mental health condition? So there's a lot of different roads that we end up going down when we avoid or prolong these conversations that need to be had. And it has to start. Nadia, I keep going back to Nadia mentioned at the very beginning, mindfulness and self-awareness, because these are core concepts that if we don't take the time to connect with ourselves, to understand where we are at, everything becomes a trigger, and then we always are caught on that roller coaster of emotions. And so even though these conversations are incredibly important, they need us to share a part of ourselves, but they also need us to create a safe space where we can do that. And like I say, whether that is within a workspace, within our communities, our families, amongst friends, there's going to be moments of misunderstanding. We're human beings. We see things from so many different perspectives and backgrounds, and sometimes we might misread each other. So also just being able to see that moment of conflict or misunderstanding for what it is and say, actually, this is not what I meant. Could we perhaps can I hear from your side what you thought, or why are you feeling this way? What can I do? How can we explore this? As opposed to I didn't mean that, or you don't understand. We're very quick to defend ourselves, and sometimes in defending ourselves, we're attacking others. Whereas the reality is conflict is something that's perfectly natural for us to experience, and just being willing to be able to sit in that space, not know the outcome, but be willing to be able to explore it together. And when emotions show up, how are we able to take these emotions to the side and give ourselves the time and space to sit with it? Like Nadia said, whether it's I need to catch a breath, can we actually put a pin in this? Let's grab a glass of water. I see that this is really heavy for us. Perhaps we need to just give ourselves some time. There's no shame in it. There's no making us less than if we have to acknowledge our emotions as and when they come up. And I think it's just being able to acknowledge that for ourselves before we can confidently take that into a space with others.
I also think, Faisal, Fatima and I come from a sort of a medical health professional background. And we are so used to sort of sitting with someone and unpacking difficult things. I mean, I have children, I have parents, and you're constantly navigating these things in your daily professional life. Then when you come home sometimes and you need to navigate it in your personal space, whoa, That's difficult.
It is. I'm sure it
You
definitely is.
Faisal, you the lawyer, that is something else you would see, right?
Absolutely. In
Um,
fact, the emotions that you see at home, the feelings that you experience are different from the feelings you experience in the workplace, because you share some, some sentiments at home which you don't share in the workplace, and which you are sensitive to. I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
you're vulnerable. You're
Mm.
very
Vulnerable.
vulnerable
Hmm.
with the people you care about. But everything I'm reading and I've got to think that people like Brene Brown, who's done all this work in vulnerability and what she calls lean into the difficultness. Most of us step back and step out, right?
Hmm.
I
She
was just
says
thinking that it's almost like our reflex. We lean back instead of leaning in.
we've got to stay there, and it's the ickiness of staying there, and everything in your body is screaming at you, get out, get out, get out. It's that flight fright kind
Hmm.
of thing that takes over. But you know what I find, Faisal, when we avoid those difficult conversations, they keep showing up in our lives.
Yes,
Woo!
And
absolutely.
worse each time.
Hmm.
And yes, worse each time until you stop and you start to have them. When I get home, I give you a quick example. I'm uh, going on. But I switch off, and my way to switch off is to just watch something on television that's not going to upset me. I can just watch it, and I know. And my mom will say to me, I watch all the series with the blood and gore. And I say, yes, because it's got no part of my real life, and I can just switch off. There's nothing there that's got to make me think or trigger it. And I think, that is it. For somebody else, that might be disturbing. But for me, it's these, real emotional things that we deal with every day that you almost need to step out of. But I
Create
think
that balance.
create that balance. So somehow we've got to get that right. Not always easy. I think we have good days and bad days.
And I think that's where the word courage comes in, though, isn't it?
Hmm.
Where the fact that it's not easy, but we don't stop doing it, we don't stop trying. I think
I'm
that
not sure.
that's where it gives us the courage, the meaning. And that's just adding on to what Nadia is saying. It's almost because we're so familiar with seeing it, that even when we see it, I know my brother would always be the first one to tell me, Fatima, you are not working. We are not your patients. Just stop. And after hearing that enough, I realized, wait a minute. Sometimes we don't have to see something and fix it even before it happens. Sometimes it's okay to just listen, to just show up at the table and listen and know that I don't have to fix this yet. And
Hmm.
so I think it's like Nadia mentioned, creating those boundaries that help us to just balance, okay, where am I at? What is needed of me? And aligning, like you said earlier, just align ourselves with where we are at. And it comes full circle back to being mindful. That if I've had a day that's fully charged, allowing myself that space to empty out in a way that might feel very comfortable for me, but not necessarily for the next person. And as long as I'm not hurting them or myself, by all means, we don't have to all like the same things. And just owning that, having the courage to own that and be authentic and true to ourselves and others, I think is something that we need to really, as a community, try and lean more into and support each other with.
I heard somebody say to me, when you come home and, you have, the other half of you and you're juggling family, you're juggling so many things. And it's almost like you need to say, what is your number today?
Mm,
Because nobody can you bring 100% together to this family, to this home? So what is your number today? And you can
I
say,
like
today
that.
I had a brilliant day. I'm a fool, I can do this. And your other half is saying, hey, it was awful. I think my number is 20. So can you spot them the difference and say,
I
I've
love
got
that.
you? Or is it that you've both had bad days, and on those really bad days, then you've got to be kinder to each other?
I love that. And that goes back to that Faisal you asked earlier for an example of a courageous conversation. I would put that up front and center as one of the biggest examples. Just being okay to say, this is where I'm at, and asking for that balance. I
Mhm.
love that example.
But how does one realize where you're at?
It's taking that moment, Faisal. It's that mindful moment where we just stop and breathe. Whether and sometimes I do, believe it or not, it's something we would think that we are programmed to do, to breathe. But when you think of the moment when you are running a rat race and there's 15 things that need to be done all at once, you notice you holding your breath and you didn't even realize it. And that will
Mhm.
then feed into our anxiety and feed into our body stress response. So it can be as simple as just stopping whatever you're doing and breathing, checking in. Did I take a nice deep breath? Close my eyes if I have to, open it again and just look at, okay, where am I at? What do I see? What can I smell? What can I hear? Very quickly. And that just brings us back to a moment. Like Nadia mentioned, being mindful of, this is the moment that I'm in. I'm not in all those 15 places doing all the things that needed to be done, or I'm not where I've came from. We juggle. And the
Mhm.
moments
Mhm.
where we are comfortable, sometimes it'll be as I'm falling asleep or when you're in the bathroom. It's those quiet moments when you're doing something, but you're not actually there. And it's if we can try and use those moments to just bring ourselves back.
I think
Yeah.
Great.
we chase this thing called perfection.
Hmm.
And we almost want to make ourselves bulletproof.
Mhm.
But it's such a fallacy. There's no such thing as perfection, because I love that saying, when you are riding and chasing perfection, shame is riding shotgun. So you
Oh,
are
and I love that.
ashamed and embarrassed of showing up and saying, hey, I can't do that. I've got so much on my table. I really can't do that today. We
Mhm.
don't. We say, sure, no worries, let's go. And we really, really, and then we get, ratty, and we upset because somebody's making another demand that we really can't cope with. But
Mhm.
what do? We say, sure, because that is what is expected. We should be perfect. All these things rolled into one.
The famous saying, not
Almost
a
that
problem, we'll sort it
disconnect
out.
between what's the expectation on the outside versus what we actually have capacity for on the inside.
Ma Faisal.
No problem. No, no, I say the famous saying, no problem, we'll sort it out.
Yes.
Yeah, although you don't know whether you can. See, I think that happens more to people pleasers, I think. Because
For sure.
we
And
don't want
and
to hurt.
the reality, Martha, the people pleaser is such a big statement, a label that you've mentioned. We don't
Mm.
realize how that umbrella is. We almost get awarded for being that. That if you say you can't do something, it's how dare you? How dare you go against the grain? And
Mhm.
it's always a big thing that just be mindful that when you're saying yes to everybody else, make sure you're also saying yes to yourself. You asked about checking in. It's just making sure that that line is very much aligned, like Nadia said in the beginning. That
Mhm.
I'm not saying yes to everyone else, and inside my body is screaming at me because I'm maybe burnt out, or it's actually making everything inside me feel really painful. But I'm going to say no, it's fine, when it really isn't.
We have great difficulty using the word no, right?
Mhm.
And we think no means we're not good enough. When no means I need to take care of myself first. And if I take care of myself, then I can be better for everybody else.
And it
So
doesn't
it's
mean no, I'll never. It's just
yeah,
maybe no right now.
yeah.
Tell me, are there any rules or frameworks to having courageous conversations?
I'm always going to go with it's just emotional regulation, emotional regulation, emotional regulation. Always, always, always just knowing that it's going to be a charged space, but looking after not just yourself, but looking after the next person's emotions as well. It has a space, but we don't have to take that on. I can acknowledge your emotions and I can validate them without agreeing with them. So if you are insulting me, I can acknowledge that. I can perhaps see that you are feeling angry right now. Would you like us to maybe take a minute and pick this up a bit later? So it's not necessarily saying that one has to be right and the other has to be wrong. It's not a win or lose situation, but it's just how do I respect myself and the situation and the person. So that assertive communication comes to mind quite strongly for me.
I
Nadia?
agree with Fatima, but it's almost like you almost have to understand that there are rules for engagement. And part of these rules for engagement is that our conversation doesn't deteriorate where we naming, blaming, and shaming. We cannot do that. It's like playing a really rough game of dartboard, and you become the target almost, and
Isn't
that's
there
not
a saying like that where you would play the ball, not the person, or you play the game and not the person?
Yeah, yeah.
yes.
In fact, yeah. Play the ball, not the man.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's important because we always think in order to be heard, we've got to almost shame and blame someone else. And part
Or
of being
stand on the
heard,
next person.
yes. And part of it is actually owning what your part or, where you dropped the ball. So it's about, and I think, Faisal, it's emotional intelligence. If anything, we're realizing in life right now, more than IQ, more than
Yeah.
physical strength, it's emotional
EQ.
intelligence
Mhm.
that is our most resilient thing to help us go forward. And I think, we still not there yet. We're not teaching our children emotional intelligence. Our
Mhm.
children are leaving school academically sound. Physically, yes, they're getting the sport, but emotionally, whoa, they're not ready for this world. And
Mhm.
that is our shortfall. We should be doing better.
Nadia,
It's
do you
not a
notice
matter of, do as I say, it's more do as I do. It's what are
Mhm.
we doing? What culture are we cultivating as communities and as families that it creates this precedence to take the time to understand myself and to be as genuine and authentic as I can be when I show up.
Nadia, can you just explain the concept of emotional intelligence, please?
So, emotional intelligence is being able to sort of weigh in the balance, right? So it's like Fatima says, it's regulation. It's like you hear something, you feel it, and it's almost like now where is the balance there? What is expected? Reading the situation before you respond. And when you respond, it's a very measured response. It's
Mhm.
not, from your gut, which sometimes is, or a response,
Impulsive.
to a trigger. It's not that. It's not firing something. It's saying, why is this happening? What is the context of it? So it's unpacking all of that in a moment.
Now, are there any keys to courageous conversations?
Fatima, what would you say the keys are?
I think it's being able to separate what you've done. I love the way you explained it earlier, and Brene Brown is really amazing when it comes to adult vulnerability. But it's being able to separate what I have done to from what I have done to who I am as a person. So I'm able to, like you saying, we often are not the first ones to be willing to acknowledge when I've dropped the all. And if we do, it's a matter of I must apologize for everything that I am. And the reality is it's not. It's if I have made a mistake, I'm able to step up and own that, and knowing that it doesn't take away from me as a person. So I think for me, it goes back to being willing to be in a space where you actually listening to the person. You're not listening to respond and throw a bigger stone or have a louder input that steps straight over that, but really hearing what is being said, taking the time, like Nadia said, to understand that, and then being able to respond and respond in a way that acknowledges the human being that you're speaking to, having that degree of empathy and being very mindful. So it brings us straight back to all the basics that we would call assertive communication. I'm not telling you what you want to hear, even if maybe there has to be constructive criticism involved, or I have to really say, hang on, no, this really didn't work. It hurt me when you said 1, 2, and 3, or I know this might seem very different or going against the grain, but this is what I firmly believe, and here's why. So it's being very honest and very open in our communication, but regulating ourselves throughout that space, holding space for whatever comes up and acknowledging it, but knowing that none of that takes away what we did, does not equate to our worth or makes us less than. Not having unfair expectations, like Nadia has explained beautifully already, but it's about this is why I'm false and all, and here's what I can work with. Thank you for pointing that out for me. Do you have an idea of what that looks like? Asking for help if I need it. And why I go back to these same things, Faisal, is it doesn't matter what patients come in with. Always goes back to the basics of, listen, somewhere along the line we lost the balance. How do we regain that? And it can't be regained by just breezing over into the next space. It has to be sitting down and having a conversation with someone and saying, hey, listen, how can we help each other in this space? Or moving forward, we might need to look at doing 1, 2, and 3 differently. And change is often something that we, again, like Nadia mentioned, vulnerability is something we don't like to lean into. Change is also something that we almost have an adverse response to it before we're able to realize, hang on, this is not going anywhere. And I need to be willing to sit with it.
Okay, we receive a WhatsApp. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Faisal. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I wish to remain anonymous, please. I've been working at my company for 20 years. A new boss joined us last year after the previous boss retired. He had asked me and the team to let him know where we see ourselves and the roles we want to fill. We went back to him to let him know, but nothing was put in place. I said I would be looking to go into a challenging position as a manager. He never moved forward to appoint me to the role, but piled on the workload. When I confronted him, he became rude and defensive and threatening. I was shocked at his response. I even closed the office door to avoid a public spectacle by the other team members seeing what was going on. I calmed down the situation to focus on the work and not show a negative response. However, the incident of that day got me very concerned and felt that I needed to place on record my dissatisfaction. He was leaving for a 3-week business travel, so it gave me a chance to consider the best approach. So 3 weeks later, I built up the courage to send an email to him and copied the HR. A meeting was held, but he was very defensive and tried to spin it around. He became aggressive. The HR had to caution him. He eventually apologized after we took time out during the meeting. However, he has since been trying to get me to change my job description by taking away certain enjoyable tasks. The trust has been eroded. It seems like he wants me out. Allah knows best. I think that's one of our listeners that's just sharing an experience with us. Do you just comment on what you just heard, Nadia or Fatima?
Well, I think it's exceptionally brave to try, and I applaud you for taking that step to try and resolve something. I think when we look at workplace matters, we are governed by labor law, all of these things. But Faisal, I think we all experience it where it's almost like, you enjoy, we all have passion, and that is why we work. And sometimes what you enjoy most about your job is the thing that somebody or somebody senior to you pulls away. So you say, I want to do this and I want to do that, and I'm great at this, and that is the thing they pull away. So it's almost like sucking out the air that you need to sustain you in your workplace. I think we should always ask for mediation. Sometimes in a situation like this, it's an imbalance. He's your boss. You can't. There's no way you can do something about this, and you've got to ask for mediation. Because Faizal, what we've all got to realize right now is that jobs are few and far between, right? Finding a new job, doing all of those things are difficult. But do you stay? Stress levels go up, your health suffers, all of these things, or do you do the quiet quitting? So it's that kind of balance or weighing up that you've got to do. Fatima?
No, I definitely want to echo those sentiments, Nadia. You've hit the nails on the head. Because at the end of the day, it's that catch-22 between leaving is you're just walking away from something is never your first option. And you're going to walk away. There's going to be a challenge or a conflict very similar in another situation, So a very big respect to being able to see it for what it is and being able to confront it and deal with it. But in the same way, we always want to weigh up that balance between where are we at now? I've done my part of that. And how do I move forward from this point? What are the aspects that I can control? And like Nadia says, we are governed. The nice thing with the workplace is that there are more formal structures that help us to manage situations when they arise. So using that, never failing to use that and knowing what you have access to. But in the same space, we go to work every single day. We're spending a lot of our time there, and often our hearts are involved in what we do. So we do need to measure up what is the impact of this going to be on me. When I have done all that I can possibly do, I've utilized all the resources available to me, and still nothing is changing. Like Nadia says, it's still impacting my health and my well-being. And you're seeing the signs. Our thing is our body will always let us know. And when you're seeing that happening, then we are able to weigh up our options and consider it. But I always say, look after yourself, but also be mindful of, am I utilizing the resources that I have access to support me in that space?
We're going to need to take an ad break, but just to remind our listeners that this is an interactive program. You can forward to us your questions, contributions, etc. to the topic via WhatsApp on 060-904-1056, or share your comments on Facebook, YouTube, and of course, let us know your thoughts on the show. But right now, let's visit the marketplace. We'll continue on the other side of this, inshallah.
Station for Conversation Radio Al Ansar.
Plan your dream holiday with the specialist, World of Travel. As we pride ourselves in offering you the best in Hajj and Umrah, we also offer travel packages to the Middle East, Far East, and many more exotic destinations. Call our professional travel consultants now on 031 20 888 or view our website www.worldoftravel.co.za. Visit us at 44 Crescent Street as memorable journeys begin with World of Travel by Irshad Malik.
There's nothing quite like the taste of a traditional family meal, and at the heart of every great dish is a key ingredient that brings it all together. That ingredient is Sunfoil pure sunflower cooking oil, made from only the finest sunflower seeds. It's a perfect way to enhance the taste of your family's favorite foods. Sunfoil cooking oil is more than just oil. It's the key to bring your family together over a delicious meal and making every bite taste better. Remember, the key ingredient to a great family meal is sunfoil. tradition just tastes better.
The International Sacred Trust's exhibition once again comes to South Africa, showcasing the various sacred relics of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba radiallahu anhu ajma'in, starting at the Al-Ansar Hall on the 27th and 28th of July from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. Other venues include Chatsworth, Phoenix, Tongaat, Ladysmith, Newcastle, La Lucia, and Pietermaritzburg. Please watch social media platforms for more information. This is brought to you by the Syed Ehraz Foundation in association with the Chisti Sabri Jahangiri Khanka and Research Center. Contact 071-896-0148 for further information.
Your station, my station, our station, Radio Al Ansar.
Once upon a time, Jubilant would feel merciful mankind was sent for you and me.
And this orphan child grew and came to be the greatest man alive. Praying Jannah will be paved the way for us so we can believe. Taught us all about love, showed us what it means. Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, bihalanika qalbi tabassam. Ya Muhammad.
You're listening to Let's Chat on Radio Ansar, and of course, we are discussing courageous conversations. My name is Faizal MJ Suleman, and our guests this evening are Fathima Fayers, an occupational therapist, and Nadia Bhayat, a neuro rehab specialist. Nadia and Fatima, we just got a message from the listener that sent us that WhatsApp message. Jazakallah khairan for the feedback. Excellent advice from your panel of guests. So thank you so much for that. Now, of course, I must thank Zach for playing the beautiful nasheeds as well. Are there, sorry, I'm just a bit confused now. Are there any everyday acts of courage and leadership that we should practice and celebrate?
Yes, I think so. I think, to be able to say you're sorry. I think it's a huge thing to say, I am sorry. But when you say, I am sorry, you've got to mean it.
Definitely.
It's a big difference, eh?
Huge, and it's almost like you've got to be true to who you are. You've got to own who you are. And sometimes that's difficult, Faisal, because people will, I think, we are comfortable when we can put you in a box. We can put a label on you, like, I'm a neuro rehab therapist, Fatima's the OT, and if the way in which we present or who we are doesn't fit into those boxes, then it's like, ooh, why not? It's like
someone will be very quick to almost nudge you back into your space.
Yes. Or, you don't quite fit in anybody's boxes. And you keep saying, well, I am who I am. And they saying, but who are you, So that's the difficult thing, because sometimes just by being who you are is misinterpreted. Fatima, what do you say?
No, for sure. I think this is why self-awareness is such a big thing for me, because it's knowing who we are and how that changes with everything that we go through. Because even within ourselves, there's a sense of comfort that comes from, the minute I go through something, it's almost a matter of, I never used to be this way. I need to go back to who I used to be. And the reality is, where I am right now is not way back then, before this happened. I've gone through whatever the challenges that I have gone through. And now that I'm on the other side, I need to almost give myself time to recalibrate, if I can call it that. Just it's like GPS. when you miss the turn, you know the route, you know where you're going, something happens, you miss the turn, and then it very nicely and quickly reroutes you. But we get stuck on the thing of, oh, I missed the turn, I shouldn't have, it would have. Just taking a moment to be mindful and check in. Hang on, where am I at? Is this still the direction that I want to go in? What feels right for me? Is it still the same things? Do I still believe in 1, 2, and 3? Are my priorities the same, if I can call it? So self-awareness is key. It's just every day taking a minute to check in with yourself. How am I today? And how am I going out today? Like Nadia says, we're fulfilling so many different roles. But when you take those away, who is Fatima? And if I can spend at least 10 minutes with myself every day, just checking in with who am I? What am I okay with? What am I not okay with? And what am I doing about that? I'm more mindful then of how I'm stepping out and how I'm wearing all the different caps or scarves, if you wish, because I know then where is it more prone to fall down, or where is it more prone to not match in a space. And if I can already come in with that awareness, then I can know, listen, I'm so sorry, Nadia. Today I'm going to be a little bit ratty. I didn't sleep so well last night. Just being okay to acknowledge where you are at and ask for the support that you might need, as opposed to everything's great, I'm perfect, I'm 100%, I don't need any help. And then I fall down flat on my face. Nadia mentioned earlier as well, also how people know us. And I have, alhamdulillah, it's the one thing I'm very blessed with, having a solid circle around me. And it's those moments where, sometimes we don't see it ourselves, whether we don't want to see it or we're not yet registering, and they'll see it for us. So a friend of mine, she'll always ask, how are you? I'm okay. How are you? Alhamdulillah, everything's okay. Like, no, Fatima, how are you? And they'll keep pressing those points and scratching where it almost doesn't itch for a moment until you realize and you take a step back and think, okay, wait a minute, how am I? And it's when you sometimes might not want to share in a certain space. That's okay. But every day, take a minute to just reflect for yourself and check in. How am I today? What do I need? And how do I then look after myself differently for that today?
I want to just digress a little. Supposing somebody has problems in facing these courageous conversations or facing the situations and they're always shying away from it, etc. Now, how does one seek help? Now, I know, if you have certain problems, you go to certain practitioners. Now, for a situation like this, who do you go to? How do you recognize it? How do you accept that you have this issue? Because it can be very debilitating, it can be very problematic, and as you say, the long-term results can be an issue. I'm shying away from this. I need to address this. I'm not addressing it. I'm shying away. But then, the bubble bursts, and then you're in deep trouble. You should have sorted this out, and you wouldn't have been where you are today. How do you deal with a situation like this? Who do you go to?
If I
I
can
know
just
you want to
comment
say.
on how you're going to know, it's when you realize you're living the same cycle over and over again. That's when you know, wait a minute, I need to do something differently there. And if you're struggling with speaking about it, then I would say, right, keeping a journal is always a very nice thing, depending on what works for you. But sometimes if I'm not yet comfortable to say it out aloud, then let me start by writing it and seeing what's coming out. And then I decide, okay, do I have maybe someone that I trust, whether that be a friend or a family member or a confidant? And if I don't have that, that's okay. I can then call a professional. I can join a support group. I can call a crisis line.
Yeah, I like the idea of always having that circle, that tribe, who understands your vibe. I talk about my walk and talk crew. So 3 times a week we walk.
Nice.
And you talk and you unpack things, and that's the time when you need that sounding board. And that sounding board is so important because part of our tribe are different personalities, and they all give you, their different points of view, but ultimately they balance you out. You will find that quiet person who observes, who will just say a few things. You will find the one who'll say, okay, Nadia, who are we going to war with? And you need them because that soothes. It's almost like a balm that says, it's okay, I'm in your corner. I will come out and defend you. And yeah, I think we all need a tribe that holds space for us.
I love that. I love how you mixed it with the walking because it's that physical regulation, but also different environments and social support. I love it. It's also a mistake where we think we have to have a lot of people. And I think social media also alludes us to this. If I have this many followers, it means I've got that bigger a circle. And the reality is it's not. It might be one or two people that really know who you are when that mask comes off. And those are the people, and you have to have it.
And
Now, are there any?
Faisal,
Sorry,
sorry, I
sorry. Go
was
for it. Go
going
for it.
to say, Fatima said something very important. We all have this belief that because we've been doing something a certain way, that it should work as it worked before. But being able to make that pivot, that quick turn, to say, okay, this ain't working. How do I change? How do I change the rhetoric? How can I quickly adapt to the new? And I think that's where we get stuck.
Mhm, mhm. Now, are there any common barriers or fears that hold people back from having courageous conversations?
Nadia, you
Fear.
want to go? That
Fear
is the
of,
barrier itself.
yeah, it's the fear of what will I, the reprisals, all the negative stuff, right?
What's everyone going to think? What's everyone going to say?
Yeah. I'm not good enough. So it's a confidence thing. Yeah. What will society think? What will everybody else think? I mean, you can be dying inside, but on the outside, and social media makes it even more like we have to be so wonderful on the outside, but nobody is taking care of the inside. It's constant fear. I have this thing I do, I have these conversations that go on in my head. Yeah,
Sometimes you need an expert's advice, though.
true. And I always think if I can imagine the worst, then what comes is fine. But that's not always a good thing because the what ifs are crazy,
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so it's a hard thing to do, Faisal. But I think the only way you can do it is just to lean into it, to stay there just a little bit, you know?
And it's
Yeah.
also the
And
fear, if we just understand that our fear is nothing to run from. It's just our body's built-in alarm mechanism to say, hey, listen, this is challenging something that you care about, whether it's you care about the expectation that you have of yourself or the way you present yourself. So you care about your image or you care about a connection and you worry that if you're going to share your true feelings about something, that it might jeopardize that relationship. So you worry that you might lose that connection. So it's just telling you that whatever it is on the table, it really is going to need a lot from you because it's something that's deeply meaningful to you. And you want to almost go with the like nice, you want to protect yourself all around. And
mhm,
also it might just be something that's unfamiliar. I have never done this before. And so therefore I don't have any framework to guide me. So I'm almost going to go on a trial and error, or I'm preparing myself, but I don't really know what's going to happen. So just understanding that fear, like all our other emotions, is an emotion and there is a place for it. So just being able to look after my body through that experience, but do the work. If I'm feeling an intense fearful response, then okay, it just means that, you know what, I can't just walk into this and freestyle it. I need to take the time to prepare myself, to give myself the best possible shot at this conversation and soothe myself throughout that process because it's going to take a lot out of me, but not necessarily running away from it. That's always going to have it come back for you tenfold.
does active listening and empathy play any role in courageous conversations?
Hugely.
It
It's
says
the basis of the
everything.
conversation.
Sorry.
It is the basis of the conversation.
And
I read something just before we came on. It said connection requires vulnerability and the courage to be authentic and genuine. And I think that goes back to just being empathetic to what we are feeling and acknowledging that also where the person is coming from, but also being able to take our own perceptions and set that aside, our pre-existing or how I would have done this, or if it were me, or you should have, and just listen and hear. Does the person want your input? Do they just want you? They will tell you what they need from you, and it is then up to you to decide, do you have capacity for that or not, and to then honestly respond in that way.
excellent.
Often, Faizal, we listen to respond. We don't listen to hear. We listen to
understand.
To
respond.
respond.
So active
Yeah.
listening means you need to sit there quietly and let it just percolate a little bit.
Concentrate on what's being told to you, then you can pose the next question. Okay. It's almost time for us to round up. And yep, I want to thank both Nadia and Fatima for having joined me on this program and for the excellent discussion that you all shared with us. But of course, you don't leave without a message to our listeners. And whilst just to help you with your message, what advice would you give to listeners who want to start having more courageous conversations in their personal or professional lives? And we'll round up with that. I'll give both of you a few minutes each to give me that answer.
Fatima?
Go for it, Nadia.
I would say, Faisal, part of that is being bold, and you've got to be bold. Let life happen, We can't live in fear of what might be, Life is right always. We always say, why me, why me, why me, and we never always understand, but we've got to, I think, understand that what is meant for you will always find you, will always be there. Everything, I think, is sort of aligns itself to where and what you need and where you're going. It's the future. Often you think, I went through that then, and that prepared me for this. It enters us a long while before it actually happens. And it allows almost for this level of transformation to happen. I think what we've got to remember is 3 C's: creativity, consciousness, and critical thinking. And the only journey that is worth anything at any time is the journey within, from yourself to yourself.
Thank you, Nadia. Fatima, I'm sure it gave you a few
Nadia
moments
has
to
said it
reflect.
so eloquently, Faisal. I can't possibly add too much to that. But just echoing those sentiments, I think that the most worthy work that you will ever do is the work that you'll do on yourself. So
Absolutely.
and courage in itself is not that I'm not afraid of it or there's no fear, but it's not allowing that fear to stop you. It's just being able to trust and hold on to what makes you feel strong. Hold on to your faith, and let that take one more step. There's a common saying where it says, let our faith be bigger than our fears, where it all has a space. But every day we look at how can I build a stronger and better relationship with myself so that I can be more authentic and have stronger and healthier connections with everything else that is attached to me. So yeah, if we're working on ourselves, then it's the best work that we will ever do.
Excellent. Nadia, Bhayat, Fatima, Fayers, thank you very much for joining me on the program this evening. And I enjoyed the discussion, and I'm sure our listeners enjoyed it too. And most importantly, we learned from this discussion. I say I want to thank you and enjoy the weekend and all the best to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you. We spoke to Nadia Bhayat and Fatima Fayers, and they spoke to us about courageous conversations. I want to thank all of you for having joined us in this program this evening. I want to thank Zach Umar for having engineered for me. Zach, thank you very much for the excellent work that you've done. Well done. I really enjoyed the show, and I always tell listeners that the success of any radio program depends on the engineer. And when Zach does well, then we've got, our program has been successful. So, Zach, thank you very much. Uh, I'm going to be back with you tomorrow morning, inshallah ta'ala, on Rise and Shine. And the next program you're going to be listening to is Ikra Wafam. And tonight we'll be playing a repeat of Maulana Muhammad Amir's advice to us on Ashura. So do stay tuned and enjoy the evening. And I'll be back with you in the morning, inshallah ta'ala. So till then, from myself, Faizal MD Suleman, and the Let's Chat team, it's Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
A message from the sky, a mercy for mankind. If you lose your way, we'll always be your guide. Far greater than this world, move mountains with its word. Fixed every part of me and put my heart at ease. And Allah knows words heal the soul, most beautiful of miracles. The more you read, the more you feel Allah's love with every beat. Al-Quran, Nurun wa Bayan.